A story about a vampire. My dad had formed a company, Jarvis Electronics Corporation, but couldn't afford to work for himself all the time. So he had a permanent job, worked Saturday, Sunday, and nights with two guys. And they weren't getting enough done on their automatic direction finder they were developing. So he insisted he should hire me when I graduated from college in 1946. That summer, he went to go to Bishop, California, working for his job with a telephone company to find a line of sight between two mountains because the cost for calling from Bishop to San Francisco was very low because the distance was short, but the actual phone calls had to go like down to Los Angeles and out west to Nevada and then back up to Los Angeles. So they wanted to get that fixed. So my dad said, since I was working for him, I should drive my mother and one sister, the other was married, and my brother out to Bishop for him to be able to have a car to come back with. So my mother decided she'd like to go to Yellowstone. We had started going to Yellowstone once before and had car trouble and didn't make it. So we started out and we went to the Black Hills. The Black Hills having mountains of mud, and they had a lot of fossil bones and things like that they had under glass and places. And there was one mountain they called Vampire Mountain, Vampire Peaks. I only remember that because of my story, and it comes up later. I don't remember the names of the other mountains. We went from there, we went to Black Hills, then we went on the Bighorn Mountains to go to Yellowstone. When we were going up the mountains, my mother kept trying to get me to drive on the wrong side of the road because of the hill being so steep on the other side, on our side of the road a lot of the way. We got to Yellowstone and got to see bears and moose and buffalo and lakes, waterfalls, geysers. It was a beautiful place. I've been back to several times, many times since. After we decided to leave Yellowstone, my mother said, "Oh, we got plenty of time. Let's go to the Great Smoky Mountains, not Smoky. Let's go to
Grand Canyon?
Darn it. The mountain in between there is a national park. It's a very big one, and it's halfway between Yellowstone, on the way from Yellowstone south to. Anyway, we went down there, and I said, that's not the way to California, going south. Well, we went there. She said that would be fine. We should just go there. After we got there and were there at that place, she then said, we still got time. Let's go down to Zion and Bryce. And I said, that's even farther south, just straight down. We were supposed to be going west. Well, it was her situation that she was the boss, so we started out down south. We had been pulling a little bug trailer that my dad had bought from a friend because he was not using it, and they had a little bed in it and a water supply and a stove and a refrigerator. So we had that to use. My mother used it, and Dorothy and Barbara and Tom and I slept in a tent. So we went on down to, finally going down to Bryce Canyon. And then we went to Zion. And when we were at Zion, it was getting pretty late, but we decided there was still some sunlight. We should probably start on, because it now had gotten where we were to get to California from my dad. So we didn't really know where we were going to stop. But I had bought a little magazine from the newspaper that had this week campgrounds all over the United States. So Tom was looking in that for us while I was driving, and we started off leaving Zion. We went away and we saw some mountains. One of them that reminded us of Vampire Peak. It was very much the shape, but it was a mountain, not mud. So we saw this mountain and we noticed that it was just like Vampire Peak. We went on away, and Tom, looking in his map book, found a place called Valley of Fire. It said it was 8 miles off the road on Route 12. There was a little town of Overton, a little before you got to the Valley of Fire, that you'd pass through. So we said, well, we could go there. So we started to go to Valley of Fire to camp for that night. We went down 8 miles and we hadn't hit Overton until it turns out Overton was like 12 miles down the road. And it was supposed to be only 8 miles where we turned off to go to the Valley of Fire. So we kept on going. It was probably about 15, 18 miles. We turned into a road we figured must be it, and it turned out to be a gravel pit. We had to turn around and go back out. And then we went a couple more miles, and there was a little wooden sign that said Valley of Fire and pointed off to the side. It had started heat lightning. I don't think it was going to be rain, but there could have been. There were clouds, and it was getting dark. And we saw this lightning, and we started into the Valley of Fire, and it was on a mud road. And there were many hills, just up and down, up and down. You couldn't tell when you got to the top. You couldn't tell till you got to the top of one whether the road turned or in which way it turned. And we just kept on going, and my mother kept saying, we're going to get stuck in here with rain. We're going to have rain come, and we're going to be in between one of these gullies with the rain coming down, and we're just going to be stuck. And we hadn't had supper, and it was getting around toward 8 o'clock. And we kept on going and kept on going, and we got to a little triangle, and it said, to the right, there were shade trees. To the left was Mosquito Rock. My mother said, if they're going to tell you where the shade trees are. We haven't had supper, and it's already so hot, and the lightning and all. She said, I think we ought to go back to that little town and go have supper there. So we turned around and went all the way back to Overton. And there was a little cafe there called the Lost City Cafe. And that's where we decided to have supper. So we went in to the cafe and started looking at the menu, and a guy came up who turned out to be the owner, and started talking to us, asked where we were from, and we said we're not in Illinois, and he says, my wife came from Waukegan. So he got her to come over and talk to us a little bit. And we thought it was funny, there were so many people in this little place. Didn't seem to be really eating, they just seemed to be sitting there and kind of muttering to themselves about things. We didn't know what. And so we asked, it turned out to be he was the mayor of the town, and his name was Bjork, Mayor Bjork. And so we started asking Mayor Bjork, what were these people doing, all of them sitting there? And he said, well, the funny thing had been, for 3 days in a row, someone had died in town. For no reason. There was no reason these people had died. But 3 people had died in the last 3 days, one each day. They were by themselves and nobody knew why. It was just a very strange thing. And they didn't have a doctor in town. They had to get one from Las Vegas, which was about 20 miles away. And he had to come and do the pronouncing them dead and all of that. So we started talking about it, and what was the symptoms? What did these people have? What in the world? And he said there wasn't really a good reason for them to have died. They just didn't seem to have. They seemed to have lost a lot of blood, but because it's hot down there all the time, a lot of people probably didn't have too much blood. And my sister said, you know, that sounds like a vampire. We mentioned to him we'd seen the Vampire Peak in the Black Hills and the mountain that looked like the Vampire Peak. And she said, you know, that sounds like a vampire. He said, well, we don't know about that. I never heard of vampires. But we just kept on talking. And along come midnight, nothing was, just we were still there. We hadn't left. We got there late because of going into the Valley of Fire, and it had been 8 o'clock then. All of a sudden, there was some sort of a noise. I couldn't say what it was, but something made me think there was a noise. And the sheriff, he was the sheriff as well as the mayor and Sheriff Bjork. We started going to the door. We got to the door, and this was a very small town. There weren't more than, maybe 20 houses on the main street. And diagonal across the street, the house turned a light on. So the sheriff and I started across the road, heading toward this house, because the guy was coming out of the house. So we're going across the road, and my brother started running down the sidewalk toward the corner where there was a street light, and all of a sudden my brother says, over here. And over there was a person laying on the ground. Now, we had called the switchboard operator and told her to get everybody together, somebody with someone. Everybody. Nobody was supposed to be in town by themselves. They were all supposed to be with someone. And yet, here was this guy laying there. And we looked, and it looked like he had like a rattlesnake bite on his neck. And we just said, well, you know, what you suppose this? Who is this guy? They didn't know. He was just a tramp. Been going through town. They didn't know who he was. So we started talking about, hey, if there was a vampire, it would be supposed to be an old person who was kind of not well particular. A person in town, a very well known. So we said, where could this be? And he says, you know, you've heard of Valley of Fire Peak. And he says, well, we have this guy here you've heard Death Valley Dave. We have a guy here we call Death Valley Pete. He's buried out by Mosquito Rock. Oh, you know where? Well, he thought he could tell us. So we had an axe in the car, and he had a board, so we sharpened a 2x4, and we started off. We went back out to the Valley of Fire, and instead of taking the road to the trees, shade trees, we went to toward Mosquito Rock. And we were right about Mosquito Rock, and he said, okay, it's here. And we went out off the road to the left, and sure enough, it would look like a little mound where the dirt hadn't settled. It was, could have been a grave. He says, I think this is it here. He says they'd probably put his head to the north, so we ought to pick a spot where his heart might be. So we picked this spot. We took the 2x4 and headed there and started pounding it with the maul that we had. And it went down about a foot, and then went down about the second foot, and all of a sudden it like hit a board. It just had something that had stopped it. And we really had to hit it hard. And when we hit it hard, it dropped about 2 feet. And there was kind of a mushing sound. I thought, well, maybe that was it. So we got back in the car and we went back to the Lost City Cafe and dropped the sheriff off. And we went on toward Las Vegas, and we pulled off the road in a place where there was a road into a field, and we stopped and camped there. We later went on, when we were going up into Bishop, the road going up into Bishop was so narrow and had a lot of holes in it, was scared my mother. She thought we were going to go off the road. But we got there and we found my dad, and he and I walked up to the top of the mountain. He kept watching for rattlesnakes. He kept pushing, hitting the dirt. And we ended up finding the mountain that he needed to find and took pictures. And then we went back and they went on back. We went back through the Grand Canyon with my dad on his vacation, and got back to Illinois, and that was it. We never did find out whether it really had stopped the dying in Overton, or whether it was really a vampire there, or we just didn't hear any more about it.
But you have the business card from the Lost City Cafe with you.
I had picked up in the car in the town, in the cafe, this card. This is just one of their calling cards. And I was telling the Boy Scouts about this happening, and I took out my card and started passing it around for them to look. And all of a sudden I noticed there were 2 cards going around. They were looking at the 2 of them. And it turned out my brother had picked one up, and he was passing his around, just like I was passing mine around. So I've carried this card for years.
Very nice. Thanks, Dad, for telling the story. What year was this?
What?
What year was this?
1946. Okay. Summer of 46.
Okay. Thank you.